What happens when the world's most powerful military asks a wounded rival to give up the one pressure point that can shake the entire planet? And what if the real danger is not whether Iran says yes or no, but whether anyone inside Iran can still control what happens next? If you want clear, serious breakdowns of the stories that actually shape your future, like this video, subscribe, and share it with one person who thinks geopolitics is too far away to matter. At first glance, America's demand sounds almost boring. Keep the Strait of Hormuz open. Do not threaten commercial ships. Do not attack tankers. Let global trade move normally. On the surface, that sounds like common sense. Most people would hear it and think, of course, why should cargo ships and oil tankers become targets in a regional confrontation? But the more I studied this demand, the more unsettling it became. Because Washington is not just asking for peace at sea. It is asking Iran to surrender one of the last tools it has to shape the behavior of much stronger enemies. That is the part that terrified me. Not because Iran is stronger than America. It is not. Not because Iran can win a direct military contest at sea. It almost certainly cannot. What terrified me is something colder and more dangerous. Iran does not need to win a naval war to make the world pay for one. The Strait of Hormuz is not just another stretch of water, it is one of the narrowest choke points in the global economy. A huge share of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas moves through it. That means this is not only a Middle East story, it is an inflation story, it is an energy story, it is a supply chain story, it is a cost of living story. If fear rises in Hormuz, fuel prices can jump far beyond the Gulf. Insurance costs can spike, freight can slow, traders can panic, governments can start emergency planning. Even countries with no direct role in the conflict can feel the shock in transport, food, electricity, and factory costs. That is why Hormuz matters so much. A missile strike on a military base is serious, but it is still mostly local. A threat in Hormuz can spread pain globally in hours. The moment shipping firms think danger is real, behavior changes. Ships delay, rates rise, markets react before the waterway is fully blocked. That is what modern power looks like in a tense world. Sometimes you do not need to close a route. You only need to make everyone fear that it might close. This is why America wants a public declaration, not a vague private promise. A quiet message can be denied later. A public commitment cannot. If Iran says clearly in front of the world that commercial shipping is safe, then any later attack becomes politically explosive. Washington would then argue that one of two things is true. Either Iran broke its word on purpose, or Iran no longer controls the forces acting in its name. Both outcomes are dangerous for Tehran. One makes it look deceitful, the other makes it look weak. And that is where this story stops being about ships and starts becoming a story about state power, authority, and fear. Because ambiguity has long helped Iran. Ambiguity is useful when a government wants room to pressure rivals without always paying the full price. If a ship is harassed, who ordered it? If a drone appears, who launched it? If a proxy acts, was it coordinated, encouraged, tolerated, or completely independent? That fog can protect a government. It lets it warn enemies while keeping some deniability. A clear public guarantee cuts through that fog. It reduces room for maneuver. It forces responsibility into the open. And the wording matters even more than many people realize. Iran may say it supports safe passage while still insisting that it has special security rights in or around the strait. That sounds small, but it changes everything. There is a huge difference between saying ships may pass and saying ships may pass only under conditions we shape. One version preserves an international waterway. The other moves toward a system where Iran can slow, inspect, redirect, or pressure traffic in the name of security. From Washington's point of view, that would be unacceptable. Because once a state can shape access to a global artery, it gains a kind of indirect taxation power. It may never send invoices. It may never openly demand tolls. But everyone still pays. The shipper pays through delays. The insurer pays through rising risk. The crew pays through fear. The buyer pays through higher energy prices. The consumer pays at the pump and in the supermarket. Geography becomes leverage, and leverage becomes a political instrument. That is why this American demand is much larger than it sounds. It is not simply, please behave responsibly. It is, give up the ability to weaponize uncertainty in one of the most vital waterways on Earth. For years, when people talked about pressure on Iran, the main focus was its nuclear program, enrichment levels, stockpiles, inspection regimes, sanctions, breakout timelines. All of that still matters. But the current crisis reveals another truth. A nuclear program shapes long-term strategic thinking. Hormuz can hit the world economy tomorrow morning. That makes it immediate. That makes it emotional. And that makes it powerful. Iran's advantage here is asymmetric. America has carriers, aircraft, surveillance, and devastating strike capacity. Iran has proximity, geography, fast attack options, missile reach, and the ability to inject fear into commerce. It does not need to destroy the U.S. Navy. It does not need to stop every ship. It only needs to make normal business feel unsafe. Once that happens, markets start doing the work for it. Think about how fragile confidence really is. A single strike on one tanker does not stay one incident. Shipping firms review routes, insurers reprice risk, energy traders add premiums, governments discuss reserves, investors dump airline stocks, factories recalculate costs. News spreads faster than ships move. The direct event may be narrow, the ripple effect is global. In modern conflict, perception can be as powerful as physical destruction. That is why I think many people misunderstand what leverage looks like in this region. They picture armies first. They picture missiles, jets, naval fleets, and explosions. But leverage is often psychological before it becomes physical. The most effective threat is not always the one that destroys the most. Sometimes it is the one that makes millions of people imagine what could be destroyed next. And yet the most frightening part of all this is not Iran's ability to scare the market. It is the question of who can stop that process once it starts. Because peace is not just a statement. Peace is command. Peace is control. Peace is the ability of one center of power to issue an order and have people obey it under pressure. They must obey under anger, under humiliation, and under fear. That is where this crisis becomes truly dangerous. Western analysts often talk about Iran as if it were a single actor with a single mind, but states under stress are rarely that simple. Inside Iran, there are elected institutions and clerical authorities. There are security organs, military branches, the Revolutionary Guard, political factions, and business interests. There are ideological hardliners and networks that each see risk differently. They do not always want the same thing. They do not always define victory the same way. And in a crisis, those differences matter more than official speeches. A unified system can make harsh choices, but it can also enforce them. A fragmented system may contain people who can start escalation without anyone being able to stop it. That is one of the darkest lessons of modern conflict. Weakening a rival's leadership does not always make diplomacy easier. Sometimes it makes diplomacy almost impossible. A divided state may want de-escalation in theory, but lack the mechanism to deliver it in practice. Imagine the chain of events. A senior political figure signals openness to maritime de-escalation. Diplomats pass messages through mediators. A limited understanding begins to take shape. Public language is carefully crafted so both sides can save face. Markets calm slightly. Then one commander, one faction, one boat captain, or one missile team decides the compromise gives away too much. An incident happens. Maybe it is deliberate. Maybe it is confused. Maybe it is meant as a warning and goes too far. Suddenly, Washington says the agreement has been violated. Tehran says the leadership did not authorize it. And then the most dangerous sentence in geopolitics appears. The sentence is, "We did not mean for this to happen." If America hears that sentence after a ship is hit, it may interpret it in the worst possible way. Either Iran is lying or Iran is no longer capable of enforcing its own commitments. Neither conclusion creates trust. Both create pressure for retaliation. That is why the American demand is also a test. It tests not only Iranian intentions, but Iranian coherence. Can Tehran make a promise that the state can actually enforce? Can every relevant actor be restrained? Can the political leadership control the armed edge of its own system at a moment of maximum tension? If this channel helps you see the hidden machinery behind the headlines, tap the like button and join the channel. Send this video to someone who wants more than slogans. Now step back and look at how each side sees the bargain. For Washington, safe passage through Hormuz is not a side issue, it is central. America wants freedom of navigation, lower risk to global energy flows, and reassurance for partners. It also wants a clear line of accountability if attacks continue. It wants to make sure Iran cannot turn geography into coercion. If the United States allows a murky arrangement where Iran can quietly pressure traffic, every future crisis begins with a loaded gun. For Iran, the picture looks very different. From Tehran's perspective, the strait is not only a trade route. It is a shield made of geography. It is one of the few areas where military weakness can be offset by strategic relevance. Iran knows it cannot outbuild the United States. It cannot outfly the United States. But it can sit beside a choke point that others cannot ignore. That gives it bargaining power. And bargaining power is hard to surrender, especially when you fear that your enemy may keep pressing anyway. This is why sequencing becomes so important. Who gives first? If Iran publicly guarantees shipping safety before receiving real relief, what does it get in return besides a weaker hand? If the United States offers relief first, what guarantees does it have that Iran will not strengthen its position? Each side worries that the first major concession will become irreversible while the promised reward remains uncertain. That fear is not irrational. Both sides have reasons to distrust the durability of agreements. Iran can point to past moments when compromise did not bring security. Washington points to past moments when restraint failed. Even when diplomats talk about practical steps, both political systems are haunted by memory. And memory changes negotiation. It makes every proposal feel temporary. It makes every promise feel conditional. That is why mediators matter, but only up to a point. Countries like Oman and Qatar have often helped carry messages. Others in the region also have strong reasons to prevent a wider war. They can clarify language and float formulas. They can help both sides say yes without looking weak. They can build deconfliction channels. But mediators cannot manufacture trust, and they cannot manufacture command authority inside a fragmented system. They can transmit an agreement. They cannot personally force every armed actor to honor it. This is why people who celebrate a diplomatic phrase too early often miss the deeper problem. The real issue is whether the sentence reaches the hands that hold the missiles and the trigger decisions. In unstable confrontations, language can rise faster than control. That brings us to the three paths I think are most likely. The first path is full acceptance. Iran could issue a clear public statement that commercial shipping is open. If that happens, markets would likely calm. Insurers might begin to reduce risk premiums. Governments would present it as a step away from disaster. Negotiations could widen into other issues. But full acceptance would come with a political price inside Iran. Hardline voices would ask exactly what they gained. The second path is outright refusal. Iran could reject the demand and insist on its right to impose security conditions. That would raise the risk of a military cycle very quickly. More strikes, more counterstrikes, more threats to shipping. The third path is partial acceptance. Iran says enough to reduce immediate pressure, but not enough to give up leverage. It supports safe navigation in general language, but reserves some security rights. This creates an unstable middle zone. Winning at sea is not the same as stabilizing the region. The biggest gap is between what can be destroyed and what can be governed. In the end, the core question is not just, will Iran open Hormuz? It is, who will actually be in charge?